For 2 solid years, my son's in-laws treated me like I was something they'd scraped off their shoe. They thought I was poor, and boy, they never missed a chance to remind me of it. They would go on and on about the gorgeous mansion they lived in, the ultimate symbol of everything they were sure I could never have. They looked down on me, they pitied me, and they made sure I knew my place. But here's the thing they didn't know. While they were busy looking down their noses, I was quietly pulling in over $50,000 a month. And the biggest secret of all, the one that was about to bring their whole fragile world crashing down, every single mortgage payment they made on that mansion they were so proud of came directly to me. Because I owned it. This is the story of how they found out. If you love a good story about an underdog flipping the script and arrogance getting a much-needed reality check, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss what's coming. My name is Mark, and I'm 58. I've learned that the quietest person in the room is usually the most powerful. You really wouldn't know it by looking at me though. I drive a 10-year-old Toyota, wear comfortable clothes from department stores, and my idea of a splurge is buying the name brand coffee. I figured out a long time ago that showing off your wealth is a fool's game. Real success isn't loud, it's the freedom and security you have, not the fancy stuff you can buy. That mindset is how I built my fortune in peace. Back in my late 30s, I started a niche logistics software company. Over the years, I automated it to the point where it practically runs itself, generating a steady, passive income of around $50,000 a month. It's a comfortable life, but one I've intentionally kept under wraps. My son, James, is my whole world. He's a good, humble guy who picked up my values, thankfully not my bank account balance. He knows I'm comfortable, but I've never bothered him with the details. When he found Chloe, I was thrilled. The problem was never Chloe. It was her parents, Richard and Eleanor. The second I met them, I knew we were speaking different languages. Their whole personality was built on the labels they wore, the luxury car they drove, and the country club they belonged to. But the absolute crown jewel of their life was the mansion, a sprawling estate on 2 acres in the ritziest part of town. They didn't just live in it, they performed it. Every conversation became a lecture about its grandeur, its history, or how expensive it was to maintain. All to prove one thing, they were better than you. And from that very first meeting, they decided I was at the bottom of their list. The dig started small and then just snowballed. The first time they invited me to the mansion for dinner, it felt more like an interrogation. I parked my modest car in their huge circular driveway, and Eleanor looked at it like its mere presence was dragging down their property value. "Oh, Mark, you found us all right," she said, her voice dripping with fake surprise. "It can be a little tricky to navigate out here if you're not used to it." Over dinner, Richard, who'd inherited his job at some mid-level firm, asked what I did. I gave him my usual vague answer. "I'm semi-retired, but I still dabble in some software ventures." He smirked into his wine glass. "Ah, a tinkerer. Good to have hobbies in your golden years. Keeps the mind sharp, I suppose." The whole night was like that, just a stream of condescending little comments. When Chloe mentioned a leaky faucet in her and James's apartment, Eleanor sighed like it was the world's biggest tragedy. "Oh, you wouldn't get it, Mark. The plumbing in a house of this scale. It's a mansion thing. It's just on a completely different level." But the worst was when they were planning a family vacation. Right in front of me, they announced they were booking a 2-week, all-inclusive trip to a 5-star resort in Fiji. Richard then turned to me with this sickening, patronizing smile. "Of course, Mark, we wouldn't expect you to join. The cost would be, well, a little steep for most, but don't worry, we'll send you a postcard." He said it like he was sparing me the embarrassment of saying no. James looked absolutely horrified, but he was young and hated confrontation, and he just didn't know how to stand up to them. For my birthday, they sent me a cheap polyester tie with a pattern so ugly it was offensive. The card read, "We thought this might be useful for a formal occasion." The message was loud and clear. My simple life didn't have occasions nice enough for anything better. All this time, they'd complain about the crushing property taxes and the astronomical upkeep on their mansion, sighing as if they were martyrs. They had no idea that their monthly rent, which they called a mortgage, was paying for my own, much nicer vacations. The breaking point finally came on a hot Saturday in July at their annual summer barbecue. an event where they invited friends who were even more obsessed with status than they were. I only went for James and Chloe, bracing myself for the usual insults. Richard was in his element, holding a glass of ridiculously expensive scotch and holding court by the pool. He was telling everyone the story of how he acquired the mansion, making himself sound like a real estate mogul. "It's all about timing and vision," he boomed, waving his hand toward the house. "You have to see the value others miss. This isn't a home, it's a legacy." Then he spotted me, sitting quietly in the shade. A cruel smile spread across his face. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Mark here knows the value of being frugal, don't you, old sport?" Everyone turned to look at me. "He's proof that if you save every penny, one day you might just afford a down payment on a nice little condo somewhere." He winked and a few of his buddies let out a laugh. And just like that, something shifted. The anger I'd been swallowing for 2 years just evaporated. It was replaced by this cold, crystal clear focus. This was it. This was the moment. I let the silence stretch out. I took a slow sip of my water and looked right at Richard, who was practically glowing with smugness. "It is a beautiful house, Richard," I started, my voice perfectly level. "It was an excellent investment." He puffed out his chest. "That it was, Mark, that it was." "Which is exactly why I bought it 3 years ago," I said. The laughter died, a confused buzz went through the guests. Richard and Eleanor just froze, their smiles stuck on their faces. Richard stammered, "What did you just say?" I held his gaze. "I said I bought it, and I'm glad to see you're taking good care of it. My property management company tells me you're never late with your rent." Then I pulled out my phone, opened the portfolio app for my holding company, and turned the screen to him. There it was, in plain text, the property address, filed under leased assets, and right below it, the line, owner, Mark, my last name. "You see," I said, my voice cutting through the dead silence, "you've been my tenant since day one." It was like flipping a switch. The colour drained from Richard's face. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but nothing came out. Eleanor let out a little squeak, her hand flying to her chest. Their friends suddenly found the bushes on the other side of the yard incredibly interesting, all of them trying to disappear. "That's not possible," Richard finally choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "This is a joke, a very sick joke." Eleanor, though, processed it way faster. The terror in her eyes morphed into pure, fawning panic. She rushed over, her entire personality changing in a flash. "Mark, oh Mark, we had no idea," she gushed, grabbing my arm. "Why didn't you say anything? We've been so awful. Can you ever forgive us?" It was pathetic to watch. I looked past them to my son. James was just standing there, completely floored. But then a slow, disbelieving grin spread across his face, and he started to quietly laugh. He walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. He didn't have to say a word. I gently pulled my arm away from Eleanor. "I didn't say anything because it shouldn't matter," I said, keeping my voice low so only they could hear. "You shouldn't treat people differently based on what you think they have in the bank." I then looked Richard straight in his terrified eyes. "The lease you sign every year is up for renewal in 2 months. You and I have a lot to talk about." The threat wasn't veiled at all, and it landed exactly as I intended. The party fell apart. Richard and Eleanor's friends couldn't get out of there fast enough, desperate to escape the cloud of humiliation hanging over the patio. The next morning, right on schedule, my phone rang. It was Richard, his voice trembling, begging to meet. I agreed, but on my terms. I had them come to my simple little house, the one they'd judged so harshly. I also had James and Chloe sit in. There, in my own living room, I laid down the new rules, not for the lease, but for our family. I demanded respect, not because I was their landlord, but because I am their son-in-law's father. I told them straight up that their snobbery, their judgment, and their constant condescension were over. Their behavior showed a poverty of character that no amount of money could ever fix. I did renew their lease. But I made it crystal clear that there was now a respect clause. The second they treated anyone, and I mean anyone, poorly based on their perceived status, they would get a 30-day notice to vacate. Their behavior changed overnight. They became sickeningly sweet, almost bowing and scraping. It wasn't real, of course, it was fear. But for now, fear was a start. My relationship with James, though, is stronger than ever. He told me later he wasn't proud of me for the money, but for my patience and for finally putting his arrogant in-laws in their place. In the end, they never got the real lesson. They still think wealth is about mansions and expensive cars. They don't get that real wealth is quiet confidence, having strong character, and the freedom of knowing your own worth without needing anyone else to approve it. They looked at me and saw a poor, simple man. They never realized that all along, they were the ones who were truly broke. So, what would you have done? Would you have renewed the lease, or would you have kicked them to the curb? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want more tales of karma and justice, make sure you're subscribed. Until next time.